Healthcare is one of the most personal experiences. For most of our lives, it's something that we really don't think about until we or a loved one really needs it. And if there is one industry that's going through a lot of change right now, it is healthcare. Over the last year, I've had a front row seat where I got to see the old and the new healthcare when I had a minor medical issue. And I have to tell you, I was blown away by the technology that is used to diagnose issues. The ease of getting lab results. I was able to pull them down before I even heard from my doctor on my medical app. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but I certainly enjoyed it. And speaking of the app, booking an appointment with my doctor or asking him a question has never been easier. And best of all, I felt like a consumer, not a patient. I was very unhappy with my initial specialist. So I went online, read some reviews of doctors, and found the right one for me. And I have to say, it was really liberating. I called my primary doctor and I said, listen, this is the doctor that I want to treat me. So we made the change. As for the juxtaposition, I still had to navigate the old world. And this couldn't be more true when I went to meet with that initial specialist for the first time and was told to come 45 minutes early to fill out a hard copy 30-page document. And this was a doctor that was in my network and should have had access to all of my information. And to make matters worse, the doctor was then more than 60 minutes late for the appointment. I certainly did not feel like a consumer at this point in time. So what's interesting is I had a sneak peek into the changes that are happening in healthcare, as well as some old school practices. And I'm sure there's many of you listening that have many more stories than I do, and we can all talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But irrespective of our personal stories, I'd venture to guess that our healthcare experience is going to change radically over the next few years because of the change that is happening in healthcare. Consider these trends from our new report on harnessing opportunities and managing risk in the future of health. The most successful health plans, aka insurance companies, will be those that connect consumers to their healthcare. Why? Because health plans have absolutely the most complete data set for patients, and this information is critical for physicians as they become more responsible for our long-term care. Second, health systems will continue to focus more on encouraging wellness rather than just treating the illness. This is a no-brainer. I mean, if you look anywhere, it's all about wellness and well-being. Did you know that physicians spend 21% of their time on clinical paperwork? That just blows me away. This obviously takes away from the time that they can spend with us, the patient, and it also contributes to their own burnout. This third trend focuses on how technology is going to help address this issue while making the patients the focus of the physicians. Very few of us enjoy going to the doctor, obviously, which causes some of us, like me, to wait until a condition worsens. This way of being drives up costs, including visits to ER. So this fourth trend focuses on an increase in virtual health where patients can communicate early, privately, and directly with caregivers. The final trend is the rise in population health, which takes a broad look at the management of healthcare outcomes. Did you actually get better? The focus is on using healthcare resources, all of the healthcare resources, to improve the lifetime health and well-being of a specific population. I have to tell you, I am really excited today. I'm sitting down with Venkat Bhamidipati, who is the CFO at Providence St. Joe's Health. And I'm excited because I want to pick his brain as to why a long-term tech executive would come into healthcare and his outsider's point of view on the future of healthcare, what Providence St. Joe's Health is doing to transform its business under his leadership to get ahead of disruption, the risks of transformation and how they are being managed, and as always, his leadership lessons.
Rough analogy would be like in the Renaissance period, where they had a combination, a confluence of everyone from painters to sculptors to various artists, and it was a period where they created masterpieces. Clearly, we're out to create a masterpiece here. As formidable as the challenges are, I think the opportunity is profound.
It's huge. Yeah.
The impact we can have is truly gratifying.
Welcome to the Resilient Podcast, where we hear stories from leaders on risk, crisis, and disruption. My name is Mike Kearney, a Deloitte partner based out of San Francisco. And I do have to say, I love hosting the Resilient Podcast. It's actually one of the Funnest things that I do are I get to hear from leaders on crisis, risk, and disruption, CEOs, board members, and other executives. In addition to Resilient, I lead a new way of bringing tech-enabled solutions to our clients called Spark. I lead the Brand and Reputation Venture Fund at Deloitte, and I advise risk executives on elevating risk to the C-suite. One of the reasons why I love this podcast. And today I am in Renton, Washington, just outside of Seattle. And I do have to say it is a very cold day. And I'm really looking forward to speaking with Venkat to hear from an executive from a major healthcare provider who's working feverishly to get ahead of change in the industry. So Venkat, I want to start with, I think, a really interesting fact about your background. You spent many years, I think 13 plus at Microsoft, and then you decided to join Providence St. Joe's Health as the CFO. I know you probably ask this question all the time, but why did you make that jump?
Yeah, I do get that question a lot. The entirety of my business career, not just 13 years in Microsoft, but about 13, 14 years prior to that has been at the intersection of tech and business. I spent about a total of 27 years in tech. And therefore, coming to healthcare wouldn't be the most logical thing for me to do. Right. And it was clearly not something I was interested in doing, given I didn't know much about healthcare. But if you take a step back, I mean, as sort of consumers, as patients, we all go through the healthcare system one way or the other.
At some point or another.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but at the same, you meet with some of the most compassionate caregivers as you go through. Mm-hmm. You probably have that experience too. But at the same time, you sort of step back and wonder why the world of healthcare is so far behind in terms of the online adoption, the mobile tools that are available in other parts of your life are not actually in healthcare. So it's an intellectual question I would think about. But then when I did get a phone call from Providence St. Joe's Health, I did a ton of research, and I was blown away by some of the facts. For instance, I didn't know that, in a world where S&P 500 companies are, the mortality rates are increasing in the corporate world. The average age, used to be in the 50 plus years of an average S&P 500 company. Now it's down to like 20 years.
Right.
Now, Providence St. Joe's Health has been around for 175 years. So that was a fascinating fact that this system has been a force for good for almost 2 centuries. So think about that, right? So it's seen everything from recessions, depressions, to Great Depression, to civil wars, to a lot of societal and technological changes. So that in itself was a fascinating place to think about. And the second aspect, healthcare by itself is little over $3 trillion industry. It's not just $3 trillion, but it's basically $1 in $5 in the economy spent in healthcare.
Right.
And clearly with the disruption that's going on in every facet of every economy, I think healthcare is going through multifactorial transformation.
I would imagine also your ability, especially coming from a technology company and career in technology, your ability to make an impact within healthcare and bring all of your knowledge was probably, I'm guessing, something that contributed to it as well.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Part of being in tech is it's a good place to hang out, to catch the next wave. Yep. Or be under the wave if you don't catch it, right? Now, the healthcare clearly is going to go through a bunch of transformation. Technology-driven transformation. The rise of consumerism. In addition to that, frankly, the business models need to change pretty dramatically, right? It's clearly as structured, healthcare is becoming increasingly unaffordable. So, for all those reasons, I thought, wow. Wouldn't it be fascinating to make an impact on the biggest industry?
So you've been in the role over a year. You did all of your homework, but I'm guessing there's probably something over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years where you've been here something that you learned, a big takeaway. What was maybe your biggest surprise or biggest learning?
Yeah. So, I'll give you a couple of positive and some of the negative surprises, right? Clearly, I was inspired by the mission. Clearly, Providence Angels of Health has been a force for good in the communities for over 175 years. So, frankly, coming and observing that, the caregivers and the passion that they have for compassion truly exceeded my expectations. Now, on the opportunity side, clearly you think about, all the startups, the inventiveness, the entrepreneurial companies that are coming up every single day, right? But healthcare has been, in my opinion, a bit stubbornly resisting change, right? And especially on the provider side, the thing that struck me is compared to tech, this industry is pretty far behind. It's pretty labor intensive, right? It's pretty capital intensive and highly regulated, as structured. So I think there's analogs in other industries such as retail, how when you introduce the notions of data liquidity, price discovery, quality discovery, consumers make better choices. That notion hasn't taken root in healthcare, and I think that's going to come pretty rapidly, in my opinion.
It's got to. So let's talk about Venkat early years. I know you grew up in India. Did you actually grow up in Hyderabad?
I did.
I've been there probably 10 times. Deloitte's got some offices there, so great place. Can you talk about your upbringing, maybe any interesting fun facts or early experiences that shaped you to who you are today?
Yeah, no. So I did grow up in Hyderabad. It's a fairly large city in south of India.
Changed a lot in the last 15 years.
And has changed quite a bit. Microsoft has a big presence in the city. The thing I would say, people often ask me, given my experience in tech, clearly I've had a chance to work with some of the smartest people, some of the biggest leaders. And going back in time, people ask, who are you most impressed with? For me, my biggest hero is actually my mom, my mother. Unfortunately, she passed away. She was a humble school teacher, and I'm number 5 of 5. And, as you think about multitasking, as you think about a leader, I'm more impressed with her than practically anyone else I've had a chance to work with, right? Unbelievably smart, driven, passionate. Frankly, and I had done really well academically. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that, frankly, was not because I had the drive or the passion to do so. It was only because I was trying to please her. So that's a little fun fact.
What do you think? Is there a value that maybe she instilled in you? Because you did talk, it's almost like, is it grit, determination? Is there something you think you took away from her?
She had all those qualities, the grit and determination, passion. But the one thing she's always taught me, frankly, is the notion of excellence. In other words, if there's something worth doing, it's worth doing really, really well. So she never accepted, I mentioned the academic side of it. She never, for her, it's not about, the rank in class or whatever, but it's, did you achieve the best? Did you put in the work? Did you achieve excellence in everything you do? That's what she was about.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things I always tell my daughter, I have a 17-year-old daughter and some other kids, but I always talk about, it almost doesn't matter what the results are, because I know that whatever she has done is to the best of her ability.
Right.
Which it sounds like that's your mom. So hopefully maybe I'm setting a good, maybe I'm a good role model like your mom was.
And frankly, I mean, the other thing which is fascinating is she was a Renaissance woman in that she was a school teacher. She was a radio jockey. She, she was a dancer. She took care of 5 kids, managed a household. all at the same time.
Wow. So Venkat, I am extremely interested in getting your perspective as still kind of a technology executive. And I don't want to call you an outsider because you've been here a while now, but you probably have a unique point of view on all of the change that's happening within healthcare. There's a lot written on the trends that are going to disrupt healthcare. What are the ones that you're most focused on?
Before we jump into the future, I think it might be good to just reflect on the last 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, as I've learned, right? If you look back at the last 5 years, clearly the ACA created a lot of publicity, but it did help, in my perspective, help the payers, but the healthcare providers are not better off 5 years later, right? A few trends that seem to, have become secular trends. One is the healthcare delivery continues to shift away from hospitals to new models of care. Second, as I had mentioned earlier, consumers are playing a bigger role, and the rise of consumerization across multiple dimensions is happening, in healthcare as well. The third aspect, I'd say, the rapid rise of technology. The rapid data proliferation, cloud, AI technologies are taking root, and I think we'll see some increased productivities, increased consumer engagement, and using these technologies to actually maybe even predict the next outbreak, find cures through precision medicine. So there's a vast potential for computational biology and cloud technologies to have a huge role in healthcare. Now, if you look at the future, I think there's a few trends that are emerging. I think in terms of delivery, healthcare delivery, I think the general patient care across providers will probably become more standardized. And the reason for that is I think providers such as ours are investing in clinical decision-making tools, so we're able to pinpoint and reduce wastage. Unneeded clinical variation that doesn't result in better outcomes.
What does that mean? Can you maybe drill into that because a lot of people that are listening are not from healthcare. Are you saying that, I guess, through having better data that you'll be able to diagnose what the real issue is quicker, faster, better, so that you can make the right decisions? Is that essentially where it's going?
Correct. That's definitely one of them. I mean, I think they can personalize the treatment more. Today it's one size fits all.
Right.
With the advent of precision medicine, there's dense data clouds which are going to be incredibly personalized for an N of one, as opposed to what are you prone to, and what should be your personal health coach, and what diet should you be on, not what the next guy or gal is working on. So it's going to be increasingly personalized. At the same time, what I also mean is, if you look at any kind of treatment, there's 10 different ways it's done, and it's very physician specific. Now, the question that's going through our minds is, if you look at the equation, are we driving the best value? Value being the greatest outcomes, the best outcomes at the lowest cost.
Right.
So where we're investing is a lot of machine learning and AI to comb through the data at the physician level, at a case level, to see what are the outcomes and what is the cost of getting that outcome, and are we driving the best value? So we're getting very precise with big data and AI algorithms to be able to pinpoint how and provide the right insights to our physicians to be able to make better decisions.
So it's almost like if I'm a patient and I'm with my doctor, he's going to understand better what treatment I need, and we're going to try less things, which obviously is going to be more impactful on the outcome, and it's also going to be more cost effective.
Correct.
And it's through AI, machine learning, all that good stuff.
Assisting the physician. Ultimately, obviously,
it's their decision.
The physician will probably, will still have the best insight into that patient. And the idea, frankly, is twofold. One, this is about improving the outcomes.
Right.
and also improving the affordability. Today, healthcare is getting more expensive, but how do you, get both those outcomes with one clinical decision support system?
Good. I was doing my opening and I talked about a minor medical issue I had this year, and I felt like I was bounced around, and it was not within Providence St. Joe's. So, but I felt like I was bounced around for about 3 or 4 months until we got to the right answer. So that's a welcomed trend, I would say, for many of us.
For all of us, definitely. Now, in addition to that, I think, clearly, more variable and more personalized. I think things such as hospital at home, I think they'll replace a significant portion of the inpatient acute care. Mm-hmm. That's already happening. That's a secular trend that we observe. Virtual health, we think, will become prevalent across many different care settings.
What do you think's holding back virtual health at this point in time? Because actually, I've thought about it a lot. Like, why don't I use it more? Is it access? Is it just people getting experience and having a good experience with it? Is it? What do you think's?
I think it's going through a natural adoption cycle.
Yep.
I think it's going to accelerate. There's 2 aspects to it. First is, I think the technologies are maturing.
Yep.
Second, it's not just getting on a Google Hangouts or anything.
Right.
It's the physician aspects which are more important. So I think both of those are maturing at a pretty fast clip.
Yep.
The second aspect, I think, is also consumer preferences. As consumers are getting more used to, telehealth and virtual visits and so on, that adoption curve is rapidly accelerating too.
That's exciting. You're going to go on to the next one, I think. Next
No,
trend, or is that
the last one? I'd say is, with the rise of AI, speech and natural language processing would frankly be rapidly increasing. If you look at the amount of wasted productivity today, whether it's a physician or a nurse or I think the notion of transcribing and physician-assisted AI is going to be rapidly increasing. We already have deployed some of that in our care settings, but I think that'll increase in volume and speed quite exponentially.
And it's almost kind of reducing the administrative work so they can focus on the patient.
Yeah. You asked me earlier, what are the things that kind of surprised me? One of the things, frankly, most people don't realize is the labor intensity of it. There's literally thousands of people, that are invoicing and sending your bills for collections and checking in with the insurance companies. Literally thousands of people. We're still faxing things around. So think about in the age of smart contracts and blockchain technologies. So the level of friction that exists in healthcare is quite stunning.
So Venkat, obviously, technology companies have a big role, or technology has a big role in how healthcare is going to evolve in the future. How are you seeing technology companies get into the game? Are they active participants? Is this something that you're seeing a lot of startups in? How are they influencing kind of your strategy and what you're doing?
Yeah, no, obviously, given it's a $3 trillion
it's a good
industry,
place for them to be.
And there's a lot of friction in the system, to put it mildly. I think this industry is poised across the board to take advantage of technology. Clearly, given its personal health, and there's a lot of concerns around data security and privacy, and clearly this is not like social media.
Right.
But having said that, I think many of the large technology players have the R&D capabilities, whether it's in compute, cloud, or AI technologies that really can solve some of the harder problems that were eluding us now. Right? We talked about the notion of dense data clouds and personalized medicine. That's a pretty compute-heavy scenario, and clearly, it's something we're looking into, and that with partnership with some of the large tech players.
Right.
So, despite the rapid advances in medical technology, I certainly feel that healthcare largely remains behind times in how the technology has been used. So, a few areas that we're looking at in partnership with some of the large tech players is how do we more effectively use our data, right? And the data can be used multiple different ways. You can use data as some of the big online companies use, whether you're in Amazon, where you're building better engagement with your consumers. Healthcare obviously has a lot of, data.
Yep.
How do we use the data to better engage and continuously engage with our consumers and patients, and not only when they're sick, right? Not just episodic, but how do we promote health as opposed to being there for their illness, right? That's one use of data. The second area, I think, where there's a lot of opportunity for technology to play a big role is improving productivity for the caregivers, right? Today, if you think about it, you had mentioned you were shuffling through many different providers. Part of it, think about this. If you go from one provider to another, if they're not running that specific instance of EMRs, you probably will have to carry your own papers with you, right? The interoperability and the lack of productivity and the lack of caregiver engagement with the consumers is pretty low, right? So there's a lot of productivity gains, including with natural language processing and so on, that can be gained. The third aspect, we think, is effective use of data, again, to improve both the clinical variations, improve operational efficiencies, and also to be able to detect fraud, prevent the next outbreak. The potential for data is huge. One interesting fact I'd learned is 50% of healthcare costs are actually driven by 5% of the population. So think about that equation. So if you're able to find and predict and the individual or individuals who's going to go across the chasm, that's has a big impact on their own wellness, but also has a huge impact on cost.
So like if you could start to get ahead of this and almost treat or be proactive in how you engage with them, then obviously the downhill effect is that the costs are less because they're probably healthier and the outcomes are better. Can I ask a question? I want to go back to one of the comments that you made at the very beginning when we started, not the entire conversation, this line of questioning was the friction. You said that there's friction, I'm guessing, between technology companies and healthcare providers. Is it friction because of a resistance to change? What is the friction?
Just to be clear, the friction is, as I term it, friction in the system. In other words, it's hard for consumers to, even do basic scheduling, price discovery, quality discovery, physician discovery. So there's a lot. It's not like, on your personal mobile phone, you can book a flight, check your account balances, and book your next yoga class. It's not so easy in healthcare. So when I say friction,
I got it.
The system is so siloed, and there's countless silos. It's sort of hard to have that experience, the mobility of the experience.
And I would imagine, given the fact that we are all used to, the Amazons of the world or our health club or our massages or whatever, and it's so easy, that I think the expectation now is if I'm engaging with my healthcare provider, it should be easier in the future. And so you're probably, I would imagine, seeing some of your patients or customers start to demand that.
Yeah, no, that's the rise of consumerization has been on our minds. In fact, we've been sort of investing in digital technologies for over 5 years now, and we've launched a number of applications which improve patient navigation, price discovery, and customer engagement. But we've got a long ways to go, I think. So the big thing, I think, frankly, the future is going to be based on coalitions, working with some of the large tech providers. So if you think about the assets we have, we have unbelievable clinicians and caregivers. We have access to lots of outcome data.
Right.
What the tech providers bring is clearly the tech, right? They have the cloud. They have, investments that they've made in machine learning and AI. So if you can have a partnership, we bring our assets and our domain expertise, and the tech providers bring the technology and the R&D capabilities and culture.
Right.
I think that's where the hard problems can be solved.
So there's obviously been a lot of conversation. You talked about the changes with healthcare law 5-6 years. Actually, maybe it's like 10 years now.
5 years.
Jesus. Why is it going to change now? I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about healthcare needing to change over, probably 25, 30 years. What do you think is different now versus maybe in the past?
Well, so a few things are different. Now it's truly becoming unaffordable. When it becomes over $3 trillion, it's second only to the interest payments on the debt. So, that's one way to think about it. The second way to think about it, frankly, is in the U.S., healthcare spending is about $10,000 for every citizen. Now, the question is, are we getting the outcomes for the $10,000 per citizen? The last time I looked, U.S. is 16 of 16 in terms of the outcomes we get. So we are clearly spending the money and investing, but we're clearly not getting the outcomes. So the question is, how do you, and at the same time, there's millions and millions without access to healthcare. So the question then becomes, how do you improve access? How do you improve outcomes? And how do you do that at a lower cost? Now, clearly we're at a tipping point because if you look at the population, we have an aging population. Right. So if we don't kind of figure it out now,
costs are going to continue to rise. Yep.
It suddenly becomes unaffordable.
Interesting. You are an example of somebody that came to Providence St. Joe's Health. I'm still trying to get used to that whole name, Providence St. Joe's Health, but as a tech executive. You guys have also been recruiting quite a bit outside of traditional healthcare. I think your CIO now, recent hire, came from Microsoft as well. You've hired from Amazon. You've hired from outside of healthcare. What's driving that? Do you have a belief that by bringing in people that have experienced rapid change, technology, that it actually can help accelerate some of these changes you have talked about?
Yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, we at Providence St. Joseph Health, I think we have some of the smartest, most compassionate caregivers. By that, I mean physicians, nurses, technicians, hospital operators, and care delivery executives. I think we have some of the best of the best.
Yep.
But Rod Hochman, our CEO, has had this vision of a more consumer-centric healthcare. We believe in this notion called healthcare is a human right. So the vision is to be able to provide services to our communities and take care of everyone at the lowest possible cost with the best outcomes. Mm-hmm. And to be able to do that, frankly, we'll have to look at the problems differently. We'll have to engage with our communities differently. Increasingly, our patients would prefer to engage with us, in a tech-enabled fashion. We talked about digital. We talked about other technologies that will enable us to achieve those goals. Now, and you're correct. I'm from Microsoft. We've hired our CIO from Microsoft. We've our chief digital officers from Amazon. Our chief marketing officers from T-Mobile. But at the same time, our clinicians, are basically from the best of the best institutes. everyone from Caltech to Mayo to Kaiser and so on. So I think the combination of deep clinical expertise with folks who have had the consumer experience and technology background, I think the combination we think is going to create the best possible ideas to solve some of the intractable problems in healthcare.
Well, and you know what's interesting, and nobody can see because this is an audio podcast, but you actually look pretty enthusiastic. Like, as Venkat's given his answer, you're smiling about, it's almost the possibility of bringing these two highly talented groups together to a certain degree to kind of think differently about the way that healthcare could be delivered in the future, which is exciting.
It's almost like, rough analogy would be like in the Renaissance period, where they had a combination, a confluence of everyone from painters to sculptors to various artists, and it was a period where they created masterpieces. Clearly, we're out to create a masterpiece here. As formidable as the challenges are, I think the opportunity is profound.
It's huge. Yeah.
The impact we can have is truly gratifying. So that's kind of what drives me and the 118,000 caregivers we have in Providence St. Joseph Health.
That's fantastic. You've, I think, addressed most of this, but I want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to add, because it is a quote that you have. And you were quoted, "Ultimately, healthcare is about creating value for patients. How do we deliver the best outcomes at the lowest costs?" Is there anything else you want to share about what Providence St. Joe's Health is doing to achieve that? Best outcomes, lowest costs.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things that we've done over the last several years, you probably have seen, some of the innovative things we're doing, right? We're taking care of millions of patients every single day. But at the same time, we're also, while we're delivering on the sort of the promise for today, and doing a fantastic job for our communities today, we've been quietly planning for the future, right? And we do have big plans to deliver the healthcare of the future, right? Be it through digital, be it through our engagement with some of the tech players, or some of the best research that's going on in our research labs.
So Venkat, I'm really curious. You're talking about all this change, and I'm a consumer of healthcare. My family's a consumer of healthcare, and it's all pretty exciting. But if you're to roll the clock forward a few years, how are you going to know when you're successful? Like, what are going to be some of the key attributes?
Yeah, we do have an exciting vision for Providence St. Joseph Health over the next 5 years. So thematically, we're looking for success across 5 different areas. One I'd call access. Second is the notion of using data and digital to improve care. Third is around personalization. Fourth is around quality and outcomes. And finally, the fifth one is around value. So if I was to give you some high-level points on each, so if you think about access, how can we deliver the best-in-class performance with respect to onboarding patients and creating a seamless journey through the continuum of care? You had mentioned you were shuffled around multiple different sites.
Once again, it was not with Providence St. Joe's Health, but yes, I was.
So how do we do that? How do we provide the right services at the right place at the right time? How do we think about a consumer-oriented posture rather than a hospital provider-oriented posture? How do we promote the continuity of care, right? Those kinds of things, for me, are around access.
Well, I think also, just from a consumer perspective, it is daunting. And I think we've relied on our primary physician for so many years, but to understand where to go. So if you can, help the consumer navigate where to get the best healthcare, I think that will be incredible.
Yeah, the notion of discovery, right? Price discovery, quality discovery, and provider discovery, which is pretty common if you think about it in other parts of your life, and if you think of retail,
Right.
that exists. That in healthcare, is a big opportunity.
So there's almost a transparency element to that as well then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. The second area of potential success, I mentioned the use of data. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone claims that they have a lot, lots of data. We certainly have tens of millions records of data, but the question is, do we harness the data, and how do we use the predictive power of data, not to sell ads or not to sell the data, but how do you improve lives? How do you find the next outbreak, find the next disease, and how do you improve coordination of care, and how do you drive engagement? So that's an area that we're going to be looking at.
Can I ask a question? So obviously, if you have the data, there are tools out there that allow you to mine that data and to get that predictive capability. Do you also have the challenge just of getting all of the data in one spot, meaning that you obviously own a significant amount of patient data, but if I go, between different providers or what have you, collecting that data seems like it would be a challenge. What do you do to address that issue?
That's an incredibly good question, and the reason for that, as large as a system we are, right, with 25 billion in revenue and 12 million patients that we see, and tens of millions of patient records, and we've invested over $1 billion in EMRs and EHRs,
Yep.
right? Even with that, the amount of silos we have in our own data is pretty staggering.
Within your own organization.
Within our own
Right.
organization is pretty staggering. So, it's one thing to have all the siloed data. It's another thing to have curated data, both structured data and unstructured data.
Yep.
So today we have a massive project to curate all our data, both structured and unstructured, to be able to draw the right insights and to provide both our providers, but also to our caregivers to be able to drive not only better clinical decision making, but also improve operations.
Right.
I think there's huge power that we're going to realize to the tune of hundreds of millions over the next several years. In fact, we put the productivity gains at almost $1 billion over the next several years. Yeah. The next area, I think, frankly, I think healthcare is going to get increasingly personalized. Today, there's a little bit of a one-size-fits-all. It's a little bit of an inflexible operating model. But with the investments we're making in personalized medicine and also some of the clinical decision-making tools, it'll simultaneously be both standardized and also personalized.
Does that pull into things like genetic testing? I don't know if I'm going to a place that it doesn't make sense. Genetic testing, wearables, things like that allow you to understand the patient way more detail than maybe we've ever been able to. Does that stuff come into play?
No, exactly. When I say personalized medicine, we have an institute called Institute for Systems Biology where they're sequencing the human genome and creating personalized dense data clouds to do predictive and preventive medicine that's highly personalized. So we're making the research investments to be able to do that as an example. But in addition to that, you're right. With the advent of wearables and collecting that data, there's some really interesting technologies that we've actually invested in today that, not just take the data, but have life coaches, health coaches that coach you personally based on your data to improve your lifestyle. So it's going to be incredibly personalized as we go through. And the last thing I'd say, is at the end of the day, no one wants to be in a hospital. How do you sort of, for every encounter, every time you visit, how do you improve the quality? and we've had an incredible focus on quality. But again, with the use of technology, I think we're going to kick that a couple of notches.
You know what? We're probably getting down to the 5 to 10 minute mark. I think I'm going to need to ask you if I could come back in maybe 6 to 12 months to hear how all these changes are actually happening, because it's actually really exciting for, somebody I've had both of my parents. Both of my parents have passed. I've had a lot of family that have been sick. So seeing kind of all this disruption within healthcare is pretty exciting.
No, I genuinely believe we're at a tipping point.
Yep.
I know one of our board members showed me, read me a quote that basically said that healthcare costs are rising, the system is inflexible, and we need to transform and disrupt. And he paused and he said, this quote is from 1937. So people think, wow, I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There was a Newsweek article from 1971 that said exactly the same thing, right? But now I think, frankly, is different in that, it's not just healthcare. Every other industry is rapidly transforming and being disrupted with the use of data and technology and the newer cloud and AI technologies. So healthcare is pretty ripe for disruption. And I'm pretty proud that we're sort of helping lead some of the disruptive changes.
What's crazy about it also is just the convergence of industries. I mean, if you step back and you think about all of the industries that are actually having a significant role in shaping the future of healthcare, it's fascinating. I'm going to go through a few rapid questions. So this is like as fast as Venkat can answer them. So obviously, in order to stay ahead of the disruption and to be the leader that you are transforming quickly.
Yes.
I'm obviously stating the obvious. How do you manage the risk associated with that? Because a lot of change can obviously create a lot of risk for an organization. What are you doing to manage through that? And I'm asking the question not necessarily just from a healthcare perspective, but there's a lot, like you just said, of industries that are changing quickly. And that's one of the biggest challenges that executives have. It's we need to change. We know we need to change. But getting the company on board and I guess navigating that change can be significantly challenging.
It's you have to. That's a fascinating question because, we have to do that in the technology industry quite regularly because sometimes if you act or react too slowly, you'd be the dinosaur, right? Yep. Now healthcare is different in that at the end of the day we're dealing with people and lives and health. So risk means, has a different meaning here, right? Now, we're managing it very carefully. When I say, rapid disruption and change, clearly our focus is always going to be the patient.
Right.
Are we doing the best possible thing by the patient? So as we introduce new technologies, clearly we're going to invest the right technologies to be able to improve, like I said, quality and outcome and value. That's front and center for us. That's a non-negotiable. Now, having said that, if you look at the activities associated, not just direct patient care delivery, but everything from what I call the selling, general, administrative type functions, right? Everything from revenue operations to closing the books to ERPs and so on. Those ones, I think we can be more aggressive in terms of making sure that we're keeping pace with the rest of the industries. So our focus has been, the rest of the functions need to perform at a world-class level so we can redirect, all the savings back into direct patient care. So while we're innovating on direct patient care, we want to make sure that we're investing in modernizing our facilities to world-class levels.
You've said something that I think is going to stick with me, and I'm going to say this and hold me accountable. But it's almost, if you keep your eye on the patient and all of the transformation is to create better outcomes for the patient, using your words, at a more effective cost, then you're going to make the right decisions as part of the transformation. Do you agree with that?
That's front and center. I mean, driving better value is the value equation for us is better outcomes at a lower cost.
Right.
And the question is, recognizing that the centrality of the patient experience is, close to our hearts.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you're transforming to improve patient care. I mean, it's that simple.
And we've been doing this for 175 years, and we'll be around for the next 175 years.
So a couple final questions. Do you have any advice for other executives, other Venkats out there that are transforming? Do you have any advice for some of these gut-wrenching, challenging decisions, risks that you're kind of taking to a certain degree? Like, how do you go about processing these changes and making these decisions? Do you have any advice for other leaders that may be out there?
Yeah, no. So it's the classic innovator's dilemma, right? Where you're pretty happy with the current model is producing the returns, and change is hard.
Change is hard. Yeah.
I read a quote recently from General Shinseki, which is pretty good. He basically said, if you dislike change, you're going to dislike irrelevance more.
That's a good
So the choice for us is to adapt to the changes and be able to thrive and survive for the next 175 years, or resist change. Tech companies that went actually bust.
Yep.
These were some of the biggest brand names,
Right.
and these people who were running them were some of the smartest people. Now.
And they knew the change was coming oftentimes, right?
The biggest reason for failure is not recognizing when to change and put in motion plans to actually adapt and produce in a changing environment.
Yep. So I always like to end the podcast with just two questions. The first question is, and I may have a sense for how you're going to answer this, but I'll ask it. It's called resilient. What do you think are some of the attributes of a resilient leader? So that's the first question. The second one is just simply, who is somebody in your life, and it could be personal, professional, it could come from wherever, that you really believe embodies those attributes?
Yeah, no. So I think for me, resilience is about, facing challenges, facing adversity, and frankly, not that you're going to be successful every single tactic you use.
Right.
But if you're focused on the right long-term goal, and not, be swayed by, every setback you have along the way. If you use every setback as a learning opportunity and sort of recalibrate your how you're thinking about it, but pushing forward. That for me is resilience. And clearly, I've seen many leaders do that, push forward with a clear eye for the future, and not be overly distracted by daily shortcomings or setbacks, but just plowing through and pushing through, making sure that we're making incremental change every single day towards the long-term vision. I think most recently the biggest, the individual I admire the most is the CEO of Microsoft, Satya.
Yep.
When he took over, it's just about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was still in Microsoft, and I could still remember the gloom that we'd lost, the social wave and the search wave and a whole bunch of things, including the mobile wave, right? Now, from that to now,
oh my God,
where Microsoft is back as one of the most valuable companies, but more importantly, I think the biggest contribution that Satya made is around how he was able to refresh the culture,
right?
To be more of a learning organization, to be more humble, and to be able to push forward with change despite some initial setbacks.
The headwinds. You know what? There's a few things that you've said that I just want to just reference. The first one is I always get something out of these, especially when I hear the response to the resilience question. And one of the things that you've said that I think is important to every leader is you are going to get knocked down on your butt a lot. But if you understand what that North Star is and you just keep focusing on it, it makes it easier to get back up, I think is what I heard you say.
It's guaranteed you're going to face failure.
Yeah.
So everyone's going to be afraid,
Right.
right? You're going to be afraid. I'm going to be afraid. I guarantee some of the greatest leaders will look at the challenges and be afraid. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Will you push forward despite the inherent fear that you have, or are you going to buckle?
Right. And knowing what you're trying to accomplish, that North
And
Star.
having
is so
the North
critical.
Star,
Yeah.
a higher purpose, will always kind of help you guide forward.
The one other person I think you could mention that was resilient, I'm guessing, is your mom, because I thought that was going to be your answer, because she almost sounds like she embodied resilience in her life.
She trumps everyone.
She trumps everyone.
She is the most resilient person I've ever known. So
That's fantastic. Well, Venkat, I'm serious. Like I probably didn't ask you half the questions I wanted to. We're gonna have to do round 2 at some point in time after you make some of these significant transformational changes at Providence St.
Great.
Joe's.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Venkat, thank you very much for your time. I know that you have a lot going on with this transformation, so the gift of an hour is greatly appreciated. I also want to thank all of you who subscribe and listen to Resilient, a Deloitte podcast produced by our friends at Rivet Radio. You can find us at Deloitte.com or by visiting your favorite podcatcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and even Spotify, keyword Resilient. Check out our previous episodes. There are some great interviews with CEOs, board members, and leaders. And if you're enjoying these conversations, please share them with your work colleagues, family, and even friends. And I'd be extremely grateful if you could just spend 1 minute giving us a rating. Ratings play a really large role in how much the podcast gets promoted in places like iTunes. And also, I've been getting a lot of engagement online through social media. So hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter. Twitter is mkearney33. With any comments or recommendations for future guests. And if you're looking for me on LinkedIn, my profile is just under Michael Kearney at Deloitte. Pretty easy to find. And I have been starting to leave the podcast with just a simple quote. And I was on Providence St. Joe's Health website today. And I have to leave you with a quote that really encapsulates their promise. Know me, care for me, ease my way.